Hello guys, go back to the video. Today we are reacting to Film Theory Frozen 2 is Dangerous. Here's why by the Film Theory. So I have been uploading because my Wi-Fi broke on my computer. So I got my laptop, put the USB and got the videos, download the videos, put the videos in the USB, stick it in here, and then we're going. So yeah, in 3, 2, 1, let's react.
You know, sometimes I'm listening to a Disney song and I just can't shake the similarities that it has to something else. Now, I can't play the samples for you here
Sorry, this video has been claimed like crazy, alright.
because, copyrights, but you can look both songs up and hear it for yourself. Or heck, I'll put some of my favorite examples up on Twitter if you're interested, at MattPatGT, because Twitter is the Wild West and anything goes there. For instance, I am constantly confusing the opening of Tangled's When Will My Life Begin with The Who's Pinball Wizard. Those guitar chords and rhythms are undeniably similar. Then there's The Lion Sleeps Tonight, which really sounds a lot like the Zulu chant song Mbube. Oh, wait, that's a real story with a tragic outcome. Check out the Netflix documentary The Lion's Share if you're interested on that little dark secret. But probably the strangest comes from our subject for today, Frozen 2. You know that haunting call that Elsa hears in the song Into the Unknown that makes her go exploring north? Well, it was derived by composers Robert Lopez and Kristen Anderson Lopez from the Dies Irae, part of the traditional Catholic Requiem Mass. And you know what other Frozen movie prominently features the Dies Irae? The Shining. Seriously, right at the beginning of the movie. Does this mean that the two potentially share a universe? No, it doesn't. But does it mean that I've now
Definitely not. No.
spent an inordinately long amount of time imagining a version of this movie where Elsa discovers a haunted ice hotel and then gets chased by Olaf while he hacks at her with an axe? Yeah, it does. Look out, Elsa. Here's Olaf. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, the show that ventures into the unknown every week to lift the fog of uncertainty that separates us from the outside world. So that extended metaphor probably didn't make sense if you haven't seen Frozen 2, but no worries.
I haven't seen Frozen 2. I wanted to see it, but the last time that I watched in theater was Toy Story 4, I believe, and that was 9 months ago. That Toy Story 4 came out. So I haven't been going to theaters because I have Netflix. And why would you need that? I probably would just wait for it on Netflix. Or is that gonna be on Disney Plus and not on Netflix? If it's gonna be on Disney Plus, I'm not paying for the subscription, or no one's gonna pay for the subscription for Disney Plus. So I may not ever get a chance to see it, but that's alright.
It barely makes sense if you have seen Frozen 2, so nothing lost, nothing gained. Anyways, speaking of Frozen 2, seamless segue alert, it's no secret that I've thought about this movie a lot. Wondering everything from how cold it needs to be to freeze Elsa, to who taught Kristoff's reindeer to sing? Must have been Kristoff. And where are all those sick electric guitar riffs coming from when he's in the middle of the forest? Is it the sixth elemental creature? The elemental spirit of 80s radness? But one thing that stands out the most in this movie is Olaf, who digivolves from being a naive magical snowman in Frozen 1 to the version that we see in this movie, where he's the equivalent of a toddler that's chugged about 20 pixie sticks and insists on telling you every thought that enters his head.
Have you ever had a dream?
Memory? True fact.
And while that might come across as annoying, well, it kinda is, but still, it actually gives us one of Frozen 2's most memorable scenes and best running gags, where Olaf spouts some of his favorite science facts. It's as random as it sounds, and I can only assume was included because the writers had watched some wacky Watch Mojo listicle and really wanted to show that they'd done their research for this movie. Now, I'm used to watching Disney movies and really having to think about what is theory-worthy in that movie, so I gotta really hand it to Disney on this one. Thanks for the assist there, guys. Why dig for a theory when the movie hands one right to you on an icy silver platter?
Alright.
So on today's episode of Film Theory, we're looking at Olaf's scientific facts from Frozen 2 and determining how well Disney is teaching our children. Is Olaf the 2020's equivalent of Bill Nye the Science Guy, or is he peddling a bunch of onion-level Snapple facts? The answer is actually more nuanced than you would expect. Number 1.
Right side, turtles can breathe through their butts.
Frozen 2 ends its little
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's true. That turtles can breathe through their anuses or butts or buttholes, whatever you want to call it, but they're gonna breathe through it if they need to.
Fact list with a butt joke, but I'm starting it off with one because we're classy AF here on Film Theory. And surprisingly, butt respiration is indeed a science fact. When turtles hibernate in the winter, they need very little oxygen to sustain themselves. So rather than breathing in and out with their lungs, the oxygen from the water that passes over their little turtle tushies is able to permeate into their...
How is Disney gonna get the facts wrong? Because it's Disney. They can research all they want. They can know any answer that they want to because of Google and other stuff. It's Disney. If they see a fact, they're gonna look at it and see if it's actually true, and then they'll put in the movie if it is true. So how do they mess this up and not actually have a science fact?
Bodies for respiration. It's a process known as cloacal respiration, and it's not just turtles who do it. Frogs, salamanders, even some snakes can do it.
Alright, so some reptiles. Not all, because crocodiles are also reptiles, and yeah, I'm pretty sure they don't breathe through their anuses, butts, buttholes, whatever.
Don't know how you learned about that one in the days before the internet, Snowman. That little fire lizard you just met might not want to go to sleep with you around. Probably be creeping up on him for science. Number 2.
Did you know wombats poop squares?
See what I did there? Made the poop one number 2. Just another one of those highbrow little details you can expect on my Disney content. Now first, small nitpick, a square is a two-dimensional shape with 0 thickness, so no, nothing poops in squares. However,
Yeah, but cubes is another thing. Squares.
if by squares Olaf meant cubes, then yes, this is indeed another science fact.
Alright.
We know for sure that wombat duty is in little blocks that look like this. Even weird.
Wombat poo is tube shaped so they can mark the territory with it, but no one knows how they make their poo square. I mean, it's cube, not square.
Scientists aren't 100% sure how wombats do it.
Yeah, how? Some of them are also rectangles because they're not all equal size.
Like this.
Yeah. Sample this one. This is a rectangle. This is not a rectangle, but another polygon. Another quadrilateral. This is a rectangle. This is a square, and just...
Even weirder, scientists aren't 100% sure how wombats do it. I mean, we're wasting all this money trying to get ourselves up into space, and yet we can't dedicate any money into researching the really important questions, how wombats are able to cubify their turds. Come on! Yet we can't dedicate any money into researching the really important questions, how wombats are able to cubify their turds. Come on, science! Anyway, most think that wombats use the cubes to identify territory, and that the little blocks are less likely to roll away. This is gross, but mildly interesting, which, fun fact, was the working title.
I mean, they look like they're pretty solid. They don't look like they're squishy, like other poops. So, how do they do that?
For the show when we were starting it. Number 3.
Did you know we blink 4 million times a day?
Get back on track, Olaf. That's big ol' science fiction. In fact, it's not even close to being right. Humans blink a bunch, usually about 15 to 20 times per minute, and considering that we're supposed to be asleep for a solid 7 hours per day, it means that we're blinking about 20,000 times per day on average. Orders of magnitude away from Olaf's number. To get to Olaf's 4 million, even if you never slept, you'd still have to blink more than 46 times per second. So unless you're an insomniac whose eyes like to mimic
46 times per second. Well,
strobe lights, you're not blinking 4 million times per day. I literally have no idea how they could have gotten to a number that is that wrong. Anyway, number 4.
Did you know men are 6 times more likely to be struck by lightning?
I can't say those numbers are necessarily perfect, but we'll call this one a science fact. According to Popular Science, between 1995 and 2008, men accounted for 82% of all the deaths by lightning strikes in the US. Is it chance? Does it have something to do with men's body chemistry? Is Zeus just trying to reduce the male population so he can seduce more Earth ladies? No, it's actually a much more simpler explanation. In the immortal words of Sailor J,
because men are stupid.
men have been found to be far less likely to abandon outdoor activities like fishing, golfing, and camping when there's a thunderstorm. And wouldn't you know it, that's when they're getting zapped. So if you're outside in a thunderstorm,
alright, that sounds why. That sounds pretty good. That sounds pretty cool. It sounds pretty good.
chances significantly increase that you're gonna be the one who gets hit by lightning when it does strike someone. Truly a shocking fact. I know. And finally, number 5.
Did you know that water has memory? True fact. It's disputed by many, but it's true.
I saved this one for last because, well, this isn't just an Olaf science fact, it's pretty much the whole movie's thesis, that there are these elemental energies that connect us to the past and to other people, and that water has it.
Water has memory.
Water has memory. Water has memory.
Frozen really wants us to believe that this is true. Water has memory. But is it? Is it fair to say that water has anything that can be even remotely classified as memory? Well, that's a more complicated question and the main topic for today's theory. Does water have memory? And what would that mean if it did? The answer to that question, like the answer to most weird questions, starts off in the 1980s. Cue that 80s elemental guitar riff. In 1988, French researcher Jacques Benveniste published the results of a study in the scientific periodical Nature, which showed water's surprising ability to remember substances which had been in it previously. The study was named Human Basophil Degranulation Triggered by Very Dilute Antiserum Against IgE. Whoo boy, doesn't that one get you psyched to read it. Real page-turner, that one. Anyway, the study basically worked like this. Benveniste and his team started by isolating some very small amounts of human antibodies, which attack bacteria and viruses in the body. They then diluted those antibodies in water to the point where the concentration of the antibodies was effectively 0. They were obviously still in there, but they were surrounded by so much water in the sample that the solution shouldn't have been any more reactive than just plain water. They then agitated the water, which is fancy science talk for they shook it really hard, before taking samples and testing them by introducing what are known as basophils, a type of white blood cell that reacts to the presence of antibodies. And the basophils reacted. If that was too sciencey for you, it basically amounts to this. I'm allergic to dogs, right? So I walk into an absolutely massive room. Massive room. Think like a room the size of an airport hangar. All your normal stuff is in there, but like it is huge. And in there, somewhere, is a single small chihuahua. I walk in and boom, I sneeze. Even though it's one small dog in an otherwise massive room that wouldn't make me sneeze. That is what happened in this test. The basophil sneezed in a giant room where there was only one dog in essence. Benveniste reported his findings with this analogy. Quote, it's like agitating a car key in the river, going miles downstream, extracting a few drops of water, and then starting one's car with the water. End quote. Benveniste, buddy, stick to the science. I'll handle the explanatory metaphors, because that one sucked. Like, you managed to even make me more confused with that one. Anyway, his conclusion was that water remembers what it's contained, and what has passed through it long after those materials are no longer present in the water itself. Hence the short version, water has memory. And Jacques Benveniste wasn't the only one to conclude this either. In the mid-1990s, a man named Masaru Emoto claimed that he could change the way that water crystallized based on the types of emotional energies that the water had been exposed to. In his tests, he exposed samples of water to positive words and pictures, words like love and appreciation, and pictures like elephants and shrines, as well as negative stressful stimuli like heavy metal music and words like, you fool!
You suck! When it comes to water samples, you're a big old drip. I've seen toilet water that's better than you. You should be ashamed of yourself. Shh, we're doing science. You still suck! You're the worst water ever!
It sounds stupid, but basically this amounted to a man telling a glass of water to go die and calling it science. He would then freeze.
How's that science? Wow, you really gotta do some crazy experiments to get the answer.
Is the water and take pictures using a high-powered microscopic lens. He found that water that received positive feedback froze in elaborate geometric designs, whereas water from polluted sources or that had been exposed to other negative stimuli froze in ways that were distorted. He reported these findings in a best-selling book called Messages from Water and toured all over the world to discuss and present them. So apparently water not only has memory, but it also has feelings? Not so fast. You see, Jacques Benveniste's findings were a bit troubling to the staff at Nature magazine. On one hand, the idea that water could have memory was a monumental, groundbreaking finding. On the other hand, it was only one experiment and completely flew in the face of a number of established scientific principles of physics and chemistry. So Nature took the middle ground when they published the study. They chose to include an editor's note before the paper telling readers to suspend their judgment until the results could be replicated and verified. And not only that, the editor went one step further. He put together a crack team of scientists and skeptics to run tests. And one of those people was a man by the name of James Randi. Now, if you never heard of this guy, he is literally one of the coolest guys ever. James Randi was a magician who turned into a professional skeptic. He developed the $1 million paranormal challenge. Basically, he offered to give $1 million to anybody who could prove the existence of supernatural phenomenon. In short, he used that $1 million bribe to lure fakers onto television and then totally dunk on them in public. The clips on YouTube of James Randy completely owning all these fake psychic shysters are peak cringe. At any rate, when the teams applied some controls to the Benveniste study, the results couldn't be replicated, and so Nature published a notice that disputed his initial results 1 month after publishing it. Since then, various teams have tried over and over and over again to replicate the water memory findings, but to no avail. As all of us in the age of social media know, once you put a juicy headline out there for people to read, like water has memory, that's the thing that's gonna stick, not the redaction that happens 1 month later. Meanwhile, Masaru Emoto's findings have never been published by a scientific publication, mostly because the whole thing wasn't really done in any sort of scientific way. The guy took some water from a lake, he took some water from a polluted body, and is like, wow, the polluted stuff froze in a really unnatural way. Well, no duh. Something tells me those results weren't tied to the slip knot you had playing on repeat for the water. And it's not just me saying that. In analyzing messages from water, Dr. Harriet Hall concluded, quote, Emoto's popularity is a sad commentary on the scientific illiteracy of our society. His work is a morass of factual errors, misconceptions, misinterpretations, metaphors, and meaningless assertions. He writes in the language of magical thinking and superstition, not of science, end quote. Jeez, don't hold back there, Harriet. And in 2005, another study that directly addressed the structure of memory in water determined that water molecules can change their structure and build onto each other, but that those structures are extremely short-lived. To quote from that paper, liquid water essentially loses the memory of persistent correlations in its structure within 50 femtoseconds. A femtosecond is 1/1,000,000 of a billionth of a second. To scale, a
1 billion of a millionth of a 1 million of a billionth of a second. Well, that's really small.
femtosecond is to a second as a second is to 31.7 million years. So does water have memory? Technically yes, but its memory is vastly worse than Dory's. Overall, it's pretty safe to conclude that Olaf's big claim throughout Frozen 2 is indeed a science fiction. Now, this might
Science fiction, everybody. Science fiction.
seem unnecessarily nitpicky to some of you. Okay, fine, so Disney stretched the truth about
So Frozen 2 is just like a science fiction movie, you know? It's not really Disney movie. It's a Disney science fiction movie. Alright.
science facts. Big deal. Why are you complaining about fact versus fiction in a movie with a magical, non-melting snowman? And yeah, I get that criticism. And the idea of water having memory and there being spiritual connections with nature is pretty on brand for Disney. Heck, Moana is pretty much all about humans having a connection to the water, but there's a difference, which is that Moana and the original Frozen don't claim to be invoking fact. In fact, he goes one step further and says it's disputed by many, but it's true. He is actively telling the audience to disregard the skeptics, and more importantly, the real science that we just covered. Scientific misinformation is really easily spread. Just ask your aunt about using a chopped up onion in your sock to remove toxins from your body. Yeah, that's a real thing that's circulated widely across Facebook, and no amount of logic or rebuttal is gonna change your mind when next Christmas she smells like the back of a burger stand. My main fear here in this is that kids look at Disney movies with the same level of blind faith. So when a movie tells them, hey, here are facts, and it's being communicated to them through a character that they know and that they love and trust in a movie that they might watch dozens upon dozens of times, it's likely that they'll retain those beliefs for years. They won't question where they got those beliefs from in the first place. The good news is that I don't think anyone believing that water has memory is really gonna do them harm, but it's the principle of the whole thing. If Disney truly wants to invoke science in its stories, then they need to be super careful about what they say is fact. Just as importantly, we all need to promote replication and independent verification of the science that we hear about to make sure it's credible and not just there to grab some headlines. So the next time that you're watching Frozen 2 with the family, remember to have a detailed discussion with any kids who are present about the scientific method and replication standards. I'm sure they'll thank you for it. Or, you know, more likely they'll probably just tell you to let it go. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cuts.
So yeah, guys, thanks for watching, and of course, peace. I'll be back. Peace.